schedule so that Lee and Howie and Dana can give us a brief introduction.
Go ahead, Dana.
I'm Dana Emery from St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Detroit Lakes, and I've been a ministry developer and pretty much since I was ordained in 2009.
I'm Howie Anderson, retired priest, 17 years working in Indigenous ministry, mostly as a lay professional, working in seminary work with the Native American Theological Association, then the founding director of the Minnesota Committee on Indian Work and the North Dakota Committee on Indian Work in those two dioceses. Now, just finishing up as a ministry companion to the 4 White Earth congregations as they're searching for a new vicar. And I work with St. Luke's as a ministry companion.
And tonight you're blessing the brewery.
Yes, I'm blessing the brewery tonight.
I probably should have added that I did my internship at the 4 churches in White Earth, and I also took a J-term class from Brad Huff at Seabury Western.
Archbishop or Archdeacon?
I call him the Archdruid.
You're on mute there, Lee.
I tried to get in 5 minutes before 3, but I just never got accepted. I guess it must be smelling bad or something.
I don't know what happened.
Anyway, I'm Lee Grimm. I'm a deacon from Holy Trinity Episcopal Church, International Falls. I'm a retired community college science instructor, a retired resource management biologist at Voisers National Park, and an archdeacon in the northern part of Minnesota at the request of Bishop Loya.
My name is Pastor Rebel Hurd, and I serve as the Associate to the Bishop for Mission and the Director for Evangelical Mission in the Northwestern Minnesota Synod. So I am filling in today for Kip, who is in charge of our SAM program and was asked to speak today, but he is unavailable to be with us. So I will do my very best, but know that it will not be as good as if he or Bishop Bill were presenting today. So thank you for asking me to speak nonetheless. In our Synod, the SAM program, the Synod Authorized Minister program, has grown both out of necessity and holy imagination. At one time, SAMs were often understood mostly as a bridge. A congregation did not have a pastor. There was a pastoral vacancy of some sort, and a trusted lay leader was authorized to help meet the needs of word and sacrament in the congregation for a season. This is still true in many places. We all have small congregations here and there, rural congregations, congregations of deep faith and limited resources, and communities where calling a full-time pastor or a full-time rostered minister is not always possible. In those places, the SAM program has helped congregations continue to gather around word and sacrament, around mission, around the gospel, around Holy Communion, to bury the dead and celebrate weddings and teach the faith and accompany in both the ordinary and the holy moments that we do in church. The deeper story, I think, is that we are no longer thinking of Synod authorized ministry only as a backup plan or something to fill a hole. We're beginning to understand it is Spirit-led, and it is a way of raising up local leaders for the life of the church. I think we've always known that it's Spirit-led because we know that it's not our idea. The church has always raised up leaders within the community. The early church did this best. Rural congregations have always done this as well. Faith communities have always depended on people who know the land, the place, the people well, the history, the generations, the griefs, all the things that have come and gone, and have begin to stir in their area. A SAM is not an ordained minister, to be clear. A SAM does not use the title pastor or reverend. A SAM does not serve everywhere. The authorization is very specific and local and accountable. A SAM is a lay person that is authorized by the bishop to serve in a particular ministry, usually a particular congregation, with clear expectations, training, mentorship, and supervision. We are not saying, you go out there, people, and here are the keys, go do some more good luck, and we'll check in with you. Never. That is not what the SAM program of the Northwestern Minnesota is. It is a program that says we see your gifts, we see faith in you, we see leadership in you, and because the ministry of Word and Sacrament is so important, we are going to surround you with formation and accountability and support. And so in that process, a need is identified. Sometimes the congregation names the need. Sometimes the synod identifies that there is a need for a congregation. Sometimes congregations lift up a person from within their community, and sometimes the bishop or staff will help identify a possible candidate. Then there is a process. There's an application, a conversation with the bishop, references, background checks, covenants, mentors are assigned, and the bishop appoints the person as a SAM. The SAM is expected to complete regular required study, 6 coursework classes in the first 2 years. They complete boundary training, anti-racism training. They participate in retreats, synod events, and annual reviews. They meet with their mentor pastors who are ordained pastors of the church to learn and to wonder and to figure out how to do all of these things that really need to be done in church. And even for those of us that went to seminary, aren't always taught. So this is a beautiful way to both have a mentor, and then there are supervisors as well. One of the strongest points, I think, of our Synod Authorized Ministry Program is indeed the mentor pastor. That mentor walks alongside the SAM and really can answer the practical questions, the theological reflections and questions, the preaching, the sacrament, all of the things in a way in which someone who doesn't know that particular environment might not be able to do. So there are, to answer your question, Pastor Mark, I believe the question is, what could inform a white earth context? Well, we have over 70 SAMs, Synod Authorized Ministers, in our synod, and they have multiple experiences. So I believe that their experience would really teach us a lot. Their local leadership, their communal discernment, how did they get to where they are? Why were they lifted up? Why did they feel called into this? Their theological formation that is practical, I think, is a key element. The clarity of their role and the roles of the people that walk with them, and their education. The second question that you asked was, what is the non-negotiable? And I really think that that is supported accountability, support of the person that they are not doing this alone, they are being walked with. There is sometimes quite a lonely road when you are a leader in the church. And so for us to provide support and for it to be a non-negotiable for the White Earth program, I think is really important. The program, if it does not have that, becomes too hard to do alone. And really, that's not the way Jesus set us up to do ministry alone. 2 by 2, we do ministry together. Secondly, accountability. If we are only supporting and not providing accountability, we're missing something. And if we're only being accountable and not providing support, we're also missing something. But the combination of the two, I think, really provides great care for the Synod Authorized Minister, the congregation, and the program itself.
Thank you, everybody. Dana and Sandy are going to share with us a little bit about the total ministry program.
Sandy, why don't you start?
Sure. Because of the technical difficulties, I'll tell you my background now. I am retired fully, but I was for 13 years on the bishop's staff in Minnesota in various capacities. But at the last several years, I was a commissioner, the person who worked with the canon missioner for total and shared ministry, which sounds a lot like what Rebel was talking about. And that's what Dana and I are going to talk a bit about. So I sent out several handouts to you all to give you a full background. This has all been set aside since that time. So this is all historical and not an ongoing endeavor, I'm sad to say. So some of the things that I sent you were a history of total ministry. Basically, if you haven't had time or didn't take time to be able to read that, there were predecessors in the Diocese of Minnesota before total ministry began to be developed. And I came in year 2000 and worked with Steve Shateberger. Steve had also put together a program similar for the indigenous congregations at that time. One of the handouts I sent you was the introduction to total ministry. The bishop would visit a congregation and said, I'm going to send Sandy Holmberg to talk to you about total ministry. And I would do that. And given how it works and all that kind of stuff. And it was always to be a collaborative piece. It was always to be local discernment. It was always to be things done together. And we also had a mentor assigned for each team. I sent you a brief outline of the process from the very beginning with discernment all the way through commissioning of lay ministries and ordination of priests and deacons and then priests. There's stuff in there about the Episcopal Church and how we view orders of ministry. And then, I also wanted to say that we didn't do this on our own in Minnesota. We were part of an international collaboration with the Canadian Anglican Diocese who were interested. We had yearly meetings of our program directors, etc. And then twice we had international symposia that were much broader, that included England, Scotland, New Zealand, and Australia. So this was worldwide Anglicanism at one time. The last thing that I sent you was reflections on our work in total ministry. The really big things were people studying and praying together. And there was also an emphasis on spiritual formation as part of that. Each team had a mentor. Mentors met together with the canon missioner twice a year, where they all contributed learnings about what worked well. And then we did some studying together on what makes us better mentors and leaders. The teams were invited to participate in annual total ministry summits where team from all over, Lee can talk about this, Dana can talk about it, came together from all over the diocese, and they learned a lot from one another. And people felt affirmed. The emphasis was always on using God's gifts, always emphasizing what do you do well, that you enjoy, that has meaning. And the issues that arose, the most difficult issues, were really about personality conflicts. And then the second difficulty rose from church hierarchy. I probably went on too long. Dana,
I'll
add
just
to that?
quickly add, I sent in some handouts, one showing you the timeline going back to 2000 when St. Luke's started the whole process of total ministry with Sandy and Steve Shateberger. I was senior warden at the time, and that was my discernment in the parish to be senior warden going through this process as I was heading to seminary. And so I studied with the first team until I had to do my seminary training more intensely. But the three teams, the two at St. Luke's and the one I mentored at St. James Fergus Falls, all had one thing in common, that they built a community over the process of formation by studying together. And so it was the affirmation of each other's gifts, the affirmation between ministry developers when we'd have total ministry summits and find out what was happening with one team versus another and strengths and weaknesses and how to handle them. So I think my biggest besides, and I gave you information about the different varieties of curriculum we used and the Litchfield and the life cycles and the church's new teaching series. I think the biggest thing was to make it practical, fun, um, to do hands-on, incorporate art, try out the different liturgies, just participate, because many of them had other careers and jobs and did not want to become theologians. They just wanted to learn their role in the particular team ministry that they were pursuing. And so it was the building of teams and the supporting each other, both as mentors and other teams, and also the other. I think I put in one of them some of the downfalls in team ministry are accountability, boundaries, authority, uh, personality clashes, and burnout. And I think facing those head on and knowing that they're possible helps not only the mentor, but the teams work through some of those.
Excellent.
And just a sentence about what the pieces of curriculum that were available. When I came on as canon missioner, people were basically using the church's teaching series. Then there was another mentor who had been a mentor for the Education for Ministry program, which came out of Sewanee, our seminary at Sewanee, Tennessee. So then I was in England and learned about the Litchfield curriculum in the Diocese of Litchfield. And then recently it was the add-on of the life cycles, which came out of the Diocese of Northern Michigan. So we were offering people a variety of opportunities to kind of, where is your interest? How much energy do you have around various topics? So that Education for Ministry was a lot more in depth, and so we let the people had a choice about that as well.
Excellent. You know what? We're gonna and I think maybe he's showing up on your screen, Brad. If Craig is with us, we're about 3 minutes over. There he is. We're gonna put a pin in the questions about White Earth and particularly key elements of your approach that could inform the White Earth context. And when we get to key gleanings after 4 o'clock, Sandy and Dana, Howie, Lee, and Sarah, we'll kind of circle back to that and what's non-negotiable. But I'd like to turn things over to Craig at this time. Craig, you're muted.
Thank you for the invitation. For those that weren't here for my introduction, I'm on the faculty of Wartburg Theological Seminary. I've been asked to present about our Journey Together competency-based curriculum. So this curriculum is in our theological education for emerging ministries track toward ordination as a pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And the candidates for this curriculum are first approved by their synods. They're approved entranced as candidates for ministry. And then after that admission, then they're admitted by the seminary into the Journey Together program. Many certificate programs in the ELCA have been course-based. What makes this one different is that it's competency-based. And competency-based education, as many of you probably know, is a quite different modality for learning. Our program is available both in English and in Spanish. So we're offering it in those two languages. There are 5 competencies that our candidates are asked to demonstrate over the course of their studies. There are a subset of learning objectives for each of those competencies, and then learning materials that are available for meeting the learning objectives and demonstrating the competencies. This educational path includes partners with the candidate. The candidate has a local site where they're doing ministry alongside of their education, and many, if not all, of the learning objectives can be met doing ministry practices that are happening in the congregation where the student is serving. And so you have a local supervisor, normally a pastor supervisor. There's also a mentor that's agreed upon between the seminary and the candidate. And then that mentor has several mentees and they meet together. So there's collegial support through the mentor group. And then finally, the final partner in this is a faculty guide, a faculty advisor. So I'm one of a half a dozen faculty members at Wartburg Seminary who is an advisor and guide for our Journey Together candidates. The education unfolds under a series of 9 modules. Each module addresses certain of those competencies and certain learning objectives to meet those competencies. And at the end of each of the modules, there's an assessment panel, which is basically the director of our program, Reverend Eddie Santos, the faculty advisor, the mentor, and the local supervisor. And we look at the evidence that that student has brought for that module. And the faculty advisor is especially important for evaluating the written materials that are submitted at the end of the module. And then after that assessment panel, the student goes on to the next module and other competencies. Each of these modules takes 2, 3, 4 months until they get the hang of competency-based education. It may go more slowly at the beginning, but once they get into the rhythm of aligning their materials with and their evidence with things that are going on in the church where they're serving, then they move forward at a faster pace. So we just had our first completion, and that pastor completed in a little bit over 2 years. We promise that it can be done in 3 years. And once one completes, then they're go through the approval process by the church and are eligible for call and ordination as a pastor. As I've been thinking about this, I think the contextuality for a place like White Earth is that they would be in a local site and they would have a local supervisor. And, the other thing is, while we have materials that we recommend for candidates to complete the modules and meet the competencies, we have a different set of materials for the Hispanic, Latine candidates. And I think, we're there to be indigenous candidates in our program. It would be possible to develop an additional set of materials that would be culturally appropriate for those candidates. I'm aware of some of those materials from my teaching. I've been teaching this seminar on Indigenous history and theology for a number of years, but I think people out of a tribe could have a much better understanding of what materials might be very useful for addressing these competencies. So that's my presentation. I'm not going to be able to stay with you to the end, but I would like to use my last 9 minutes to see if you have any questions of me.
I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Mary, I guess, do you have your hand up, Mary?
Oh, okay, I'll be brief. My question is, do you have a pre-assessment component for prior learning that is already in place?
That's done through the candidacy process.
Okay.
So, our assumption is if students have some of these competencies already, they'll move right through. They'll move right through the program because we certainly honor all prior learning and prior competence. But we don't have a mechanism to do kind of an assessment to place them further in the program because these competencies are rather intertwined. They're not separable in a way that maybe that could be done.
Got it. Thank you.
So I hear you say there's kind of a go, no go gauge, and you have to figure out when they can go and when they can't go.
The assessment panels between the modules, or do you mean the admission process?
Admission.
Yes, the candidacy committee is the prime gatekeeper.
And
Craig,
then
real quick, we're not Lutherans. What is a candidacy committee?
Candidacy committee is a synod committee, a diocese committee that works with those who are applying to become either pastors or deacons.
Thank you very much, Craig. So Lee, that's like our comm.
And then is there another time when these people have to go up against a group of people to say, well, you're okay or you're not okay?
The synod meets with them at entrance,
Yes.
at endorsement before the formalization of an internship in the same site,
Yes.
and then for approval. So there's three steps in that candidacy process.
So that approval is always at the site, or do people have to go somewhere else to get approved?
Usually it's in their synod. So they may have to go, to another place within the synod.
It's like the Commission on Ministry, in a sense, Lee.
In a sense.
There's
Come on,
three
Mark,
different.
in a sense.
In a
Well,
Lutheran manner.
In a Lutheran manner, there's approval by the candidacy committee. There's Craig, help me with this again. Before you go on internship, and then there's the
Endorsement.
final
There's entrance, endorsement, and approval.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's really a church process more than a seminary process. The seminary provides education for this candidacy process, or you might say it's a two-track process. There's a church process and an educational process.
And the human that's being raised up process. There's a whole section of it of just who are you, and your health in all of the ways of your life as you are going through this process. So candidacy is, it is unique. It is really hard to explain. I think it's like, I've heard so many people say it was the hardest and most fruitful years of my life.
It's a very, you can't think about it as academic. It's very holistic. It's very spiritual. It has to do with emotional intelligence as well as other types of intelligence. Yeah.
Sarah has her hand up.
I do. Hi, Craig. I don't know if we've met. I'm one of the Episcopalians. I'm the director for Holy Orders, which is our formation process in the Diocese of Minnesota. As we're looking at our process, I'm curious about a couple of things regarding both. So Mark and Rebel, this might be for you as much as it is for Craig, about how some pieces come together for y'all in a competency-based process. Craig, did I hear you say that this is a degree or a certificate?
Certificate.
Awesome. And how did you come up with the areas for that? Do you have kind of canonical areas of formation that you're working to hit, that you kind of got a group together and thought about how you might do that?
Yeah, the overall guide is the candidacy manual of the
Got it.
ELCA.
Okay.
And that candidacy manual actually is now being revised. It's in a process of revision that will make it more competency based.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. And then when it
You can
comes
go to the
to,
ELCA website and download it.
I might do that.
It's
I'm gonna look
public.
for like
So
where do we match up? Ours is public too, but it's not a good read.
The cannons?
Unless you, yeah, the cannons. Unless you want to take a little nap. I spend a lot of time with them. I'm curious too, like in a competency-based program, I love the embeddedness in context and community. And I'm curious, like in practice, how is the synod in conversation with the folks who are in the competency-based program, just like kind of to make sure things are moving, formation beyond the academic is happening, all of that kind of stuff. Is that a nut you've cracked?
The the supervisor, the local supervisor is approved by the synod. And so they
Got
have
it.
a relationship with the supervisor. They get updates on progress, and sort of in the middle of the process is that endorsement step where they meet with the candidate, and at endorsement then they're allowed to do an internship, which is a formalization of the pastoral ministry they're already doing in context
Great.
normally.
One,
So
All right.
they also are expected to go to synod meetings and be a colleague in the synod. So I think there's some collegiality on an ongoing basis. I think the candidates also go to like their conference meetings and the synod assembly meetings.
Is a conference like a smaller part of a synod, or is that something else entirely?
Yeah, it's like
Okay.
that is correct. In
a
Northwestern Minnesota, we have 8 conferences in
Oh, bless
just
y'all.
our synod.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Very good. When it comes to community and community formation within all of this, we always say don't do ministry alone. So we would call this person a foreman, somebody who's in formation. So you're the foreman who is doing the competency-based program at Wartburg, which gives them their academics. Are they also interacting with other students, or is it kind of you have your mentor and you have your track and you go forth?
the mentor has other candidates and they meet together. So the primary
Okay.
peers that they meet with are in their mentor group with their mentor.
Okay, cool.
That's either a once a month or twice a month.
And do you accept non-ELCA students? Do you have students from other Christian traditions?
We have in the past, yes. In fact, we've graduated a few Episcopal candidates. At one point, we had an agreement with Bexley Seabury
Hmm.
when they were in Chicago. But when that moved to Columbus, then our covenant disappeared.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Craig. I might, if you're open to it, I might call you someday with a whole bunch more questions.
Yeah, that'd be great. I was invited to talk about Journey Together. We have another team program, and I believe that we are the only competency-based team program in the ELCA. So I think the others are more course-based, unless there are some in development that I haven't heard about.
our time is slipping away from us. I just want a quick note, and this sort of covers both Rebel and Craig. I serve as a mentor in the SAM program for an individual who is I'm also that supervisor for that same person who's in the the competency-based program at Wartburg. So she's
Just getting
moving and
started.
would have joined us today, but she's not able to
Yeah.
jump on.
So thank you for allowing me to do my presentation. I think you're all on schedule, just 1 minute over. So thank you very much.
So,
Thank
Craig,
you,
I
Craig.
want you to
Thank
know that
you.
our mentor is a Wartburg graduate
Oh yeah,
in
Mhm.
International Falls,
must
Minnesota.
be
Andy Berry.
Yep, Andy
Oh,
Berry.
Andy Berry, I know. Say hi to Andy. He was my
We
student.
certainly
Yeah,
will.
very good.
And I was his pastor at Hope Lutheran in Walker. We continue with the Bexley Seabury presentation. Brad and Mary.
Oh, wow. Time flies. How about that? Thank you. I'm going to share some slides here. Hopefully you'll be able to see them. You got it? Everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, just one of our core principles that I think we all agree on is because an indigenous person shouldn't have to be colonized to serve God and the church,
Mhm.
which is why we're about indigenizing theological education. And in the Episcopal Church, we've seen a significant need for that over the years. It's been demonstrated. The need for increased Indigenous congregational leadership, both ordained and lay, and support continues in tech and other denominations. We have a need for clergy and congregational leaders. We really have a need to empower and in some cases even start youth and young adult ministries. And in the Episcopal Church, we're kind of at a leadership crisis right now because since 2019, we haven't had any indigenous Episcopal diocesan bishops in our House of Bishops. We have some who are retired, we have some who are assisting bishops, but we don't have any currently functioning diocesan or what we would refer to as ordinaries in the Episcopal Church. Hopefully that will change in the near future, but that's kind of the situation that we've been in. And so recognizing these needs, Bexley Seabury Seminary partnered with NATES, the North American Indigenous Institute of Theological Studies, and it's also known as an Indigenous Learning Community, last year in 2025, as members of the Association of Theological Schools, and we created the Indigenous Theological Circle, or the ITC. And what that is, ITC is an ecumenical hub that facilitates the training and mentorship of skillful leaders, ministers, and academic scholars. So it's ecumenical. The scale of is a little different here. It's across denominations and all of the individuals pertaining to each one. And we have a dual mission. It is to empower and resource Indigenous mainline congregations to flourish and support indigenizing theological studies. And we received a grant from the Lilly Foundation, or the Lilly Endowment, late last year to begin our work, which we started in January of this year. So this is brand new stuff. And we're just starting out doing some things that have been informed by our histories, some of the things that have worked, and some of the things that have needed some tweaking or some significant changes. So this is current and current stuff and future endeavors that we're looking at here. Now, the partnership between Bexley Seabury and NATES has grown to include Vancouver School of Theology and Indigenous leaders from the ELCA, including Vance Blackfox, who's on the call here, those from the UCC, the Presbyterian Church, and the United Methodist Church. So it's for Indigenous people interdenominationally. And in conceptualizing their work together, our work together, the leaders from Bexley Seabury and NATES consulted with a group of Indigenous advisors regarding how such a partnership could respond to the needs. So we've been working with advisory councils comprised of Indigenous people, elders, and leaders in the church for ideas, advice, and guidance in moving forward, because we found that in the past, efforts to indigenize theological education or provide uh, uh, um, to facilitate ordination processes without the use of an advisory council have failed because they lost the connection to the Indigenous community. And whenever there's such a disconnection, it doesn't go well, is what our experience has been. So the goals of the ITC, one is to advance Indigenous theological education. The other is to train faithful and skillful ministers. And then the third, to promote flourishing Indigenous congregations across mainline denominations. And so this is about education and training, and then the application of the same within an Indigenous context. Some specific objectives of ITC. One is to build and administer the Indigenous Scholars Program. We need advanced graduate level Indigenous scholars to provide theological inspiration. We need those who can be published in journals. We need to increase that so that not only Indigenous people are able to see and to hear what our academic leaders are thinking, but be able to have some type of interaction with them in their publishing and in their writing. The other is to support the Indigenous Christian Leaders Gathering, which meets once a year. We had our most recent one in January of this year in Phoenix. And it's an opportunity for church leaders, Indigenous church leaders across denominations to meet one another, to fellowship, to network, to exchange ideas, things that work, things that are working well, areas that need to be addressed. We did quite a bit of that in January. We have one tentatively planned for next year, January of 2027. And the theme for that is going to be wellness, clergy wellness, health, and balance, and maintaining a lifestyle that is healthy for the person who is engaged in ministry. And then to host space for theological educators and practitioners to network and develop curriculum, programming, workshops, and educational materials to support aspiring ministers and congregations among Indigenous people. So these are some of our objectives and our goals. And the ITC is organized with two key positions. The first one is the Fire Keeper for Indigenous Theological Studies, and that is Dr. Chris Hulklatubby, who's Choctaw. And then the Fire Keeper for Indigenous Congregational Studies, which is the role that I occupy. And the difference between the two is theological studies obviously is more of an academic position, which looks at the formation and training of Indigenous people who are preparing for ministry or currently involved in ministry, who are looking to hone their skills and increase their knowledge base. And then congregational studies is about increasing the ministry effectiveness within our Indigenous communities. What are the needs? What are the issues? Are some of the things that the congregational studies chair will look at. How can ITC be involved in those areas? Now, you see MAP mentioned in here, Betsy Seabury's Indigenous Mentor Assessed Pathways program. that's something that Mary has had extensive experience with, and she provided us with a handout that came from Dr. Kay Apiago from Bexley Seabury. I don't know, Mary, if you'd like to say anything more about that.
I'd like to be able to show that when you finish the slides, or at least hit the high points on that.
Sure.
Brad, also, Robert, you're the presenter, and Robert Tubles, I don't know if you've seen his name pop up on the screen. He's trying to enter the room.
Okay, I see that. Okay. So the firekeepers will work alongside of Bexley Seabury to provide Indigenous designed, developed, and delivered graduate courses through the MAP program and the Bexley Seabury's Deacon Formation program, and working with Mary to coordinate and teach certificate level courses aimed at lay leaders and those interested in lifelong learning. So the ITC is housed in Bexley Seabury. It's our ATC partner, and it supports partners across mainline denominations that are dedicated to supporting Indigenous congregations of theological studies. At the heart of all its activities is building and maintaining ecumenical relationships of trust that are foundational for developing innovative strategies for training and walking alongside of Indigenous ministers and scholars. We determined from past experience that we are much stronger, we're better equipped if we work together denominationally rather than in our own silos. We're too small and we don't have the resources to exist in that pathway. The Indigenous Scholars Program provides mentorship and educational support for theological graduate students and faculty across the United States and Canada who are invested in Indigenous theological scholarship and strengthening Indigenous congregations. And this program is modeled after the successful Hispanic scholarship program. We also have the Pathways to Ordination program, which supports the training of lay leaders in Indigenous congregations as they pursue ordination according to the requirements of their denomination. It provides financial support to certificate level students serving Indigenous congregations to attend theological education programs sponsored by their own denominations, which would include Teal and NACOS of the UMC. I mentioned earlier the Indigenous Christian Leaders Gathering, and that's a photo from our last one, taken just outside of Phoenix. So our question in moving forward is, how can we serve your diocese? How can we serve your synod? How can we serve your judicatory? And if you are interested in what contextualized Indigenous theological education and ministerial education might look like for your region, please talk to us. We would love to be in communication with you. And here's our contacts. So I'll leave that up. Dr. Hokla Tubby is the firekeeper for theological studies. I'm the firekeeper for congregational studies. And Vance is the director of ecumenical and tribal relations. And quickly going to Mary.
All right.
I will, let's see if.
Are you able to share the thing?
I can bring that up here.
We don't have time to go through it in detail, but at least people
Okay,
can
here it
see
is.
what it looks like. This was prepared by Dr. Kay Apigo, who is the director of what is called the MAP program. And this is, it sounds similar in some ways to the, to Alan's description, or to, not Alan, to the Wartburg program. We do have a 3-member team for every seminarian who is involved. a faculty mentor, a seminary person or spiritual person, and a contextual mentor, so that everyone going through this program is very, very well supported. I'm mentoring two people running churches in northern Alaska, in rural Alaska, and we talk weekly on Zoom if or phone calls, whatever. This model is a degree program. So this is a program at the present time that incorporates the same learning outcomes as our traditional MDiv program. But the way that they are evaluated, the way that they are met, is in the context of where the students are working. You can scroll down, Brad, if you want to. This is highly relational. It's intentional, designed to involve people in a holistic learning experience. And a lot of our research came from surveying two groups of elders at Winter Talk, which is an annual gathering in the Episcopal Church in January. And we found out from these 2 years of survey work what kinds of things were getting in the way of Indigenous people going through a traditional seminary program. Not everyone is seeking a degree, and therefore this program may not be of value to every Indigenous person, but some people are seeking an MDiv, and this program is tailored to meet their needs, even if they don't know exactly how it's going to work. There's plenty of people to, as they go through the program. One thing that we do have is a pre-assessment of competence that they bring with them, and that helps us to estimate how long it's going to take them to go through the program. We allow them to process at their own pace up to 5 years. We expect that they will finish within 5 years. We do not have courses. We have what are called paths. If you could go ahead, Brad, and scroll down. This is an example of learning out for the path for the Old Testament. The content is regulated by the canons for the Episcopal Church. So it is an academic program in the sense that we are presenting information that they will need to pass canonically if their diocese requires that they sit for those exams. And the main advantage of this is the self-pacing. It's the ability to be who are experienced in their field. It's also the ability to go through it's not as formal as a cohort, but it is a social grouping of people from all over the country. This is an online program, but the students get together or are not required, but do typically come together twice a year. And we just had a week of that last week with commencement. We have matriculation in the fall, and then we installed a new president last week. So they were together quite a bit of time last week in Chicago. We are located in Chicago. We have just finished moving to the diocesan house and St. James Cathedral on Huron Street. So I think that's about all the time that I can take right now, but you do have this copy, and my role is different from Brad's in the sense that I do spend quite a bit of time with Bexley Seabury, but it is under the auspices of the presiding bishop. So I am on the team for the presiding bishop in New York City, and my job is theological education. Indigenous is the specialization, but the work, it goes beyond the US because we're in 20 nations. So it is a pretty challenging position, but the joy of my life is working with Bexley Seabury because they're very committed to having Indigenous people as a focus. And that's pretty exciting to me. I am an enrolled member of the Blackfeet Nation in Montana, and my education was paid for with Blackfeet funding. So I'm very committed to programs that are contextualized and that offer people a fair shake to learn theology, but in a way that they'll be able to use it with the people they want to serve. You can reach me easily through mchrist@episcopalchurch.org. And it's also in the email that we all get. I'd be happy to answer questions when we have more time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary and Brad. Vance, thank you for your patience. If you could share a little bit, well, your unique bridging role between Mary and Brad's work and your role with Teal as well.
Sure. Thank you. And so, yeah, thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. Yeah, so it's been a crazy 3 years with Teal. For those of you who don't know what Teal is, it's Theological Education for Indigenous Leaders, which is a program that is modeled after what we call TEAM program in the ELCA, which is Theological Education for Emerging Ministries, which, as it was birthed, was meant for people in contextual ministries that couldn't leave or shouldn't leave their ministries, that mostly were people of color, that were in communities of poverty, that were being led by folks who were already doing the ministry or who were being called, but certainly couldn't leave in the ways that we have always asked people to leave their communities to do 3 or 4 years of seminary full time in another city away from their own. So Teal is set up the same way in regard to it's a certificate program, and it's run out of Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary at the moment, and it is modeled or Teal in the sense that all the subject requirements are the same. So New Testament, Old Testament, preaching, so on and so forth. The program lasts or takes 2.5 years to complete. That is both for Team and Teal, but Teal is specifically for Indigenous folks. And this first cohort is made up completely of folks from the ELCA. Rebel works with one of two of our graduates who will be graduating this coming weekend on Saturday. And so out of the 10 students that started the program 3 years ago, 8 of them are graduating. And I believe 6 of them are going to go through candidacy. And so we'll talk about candidacy just real quick here in a moment. The program was birthed out of a meeting that was held, was a mission developers meeting, which is at the ELCA, where and the Indigenous folks had gathered. And the elders in the room at that moment were Alaskan leaders from 2 different congregations. And we invited Moses Penamaka, who is the director of team for Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary, to come and to speak with us and see what educational opportunities might be available to folks, because not unlike Brad and many of you have mentioned, we were running out of leaders. All of our native leaders were aging out, retiring, dying, whatever that might have been. And then we also didn't do a good job of really getting non-native people ready to take those places. And so lay leaders were stepping up. We had one congregation, for example, that had didn't have a pastor for 10 years. And so the lay leader stepped up. A couple of congregations like that, another 5 years. And so they step up into these spaces and then realize, oh, this actually might be a calling. And so no matter how the calling happens, we just appreciate the calling happening, and want to support them in the things that they need. Those 10 people could not leave their communities for 4 years to finish seminary education. So this opportunity was one that made sense for them. And so this program meets 3 times a year, 8 times altogether. So 3 times, and 2 times, I guess I should say. And each of those weeks, they have 2 classes and a workshop. Those classes, like I said, are 2 days long. Those classes are scheduled like Teal's classes and are 2 days long. Now, the things that were important to Teal for us, that I think Mark already knows, but I'll share with the rest of you, is that the people who created Teal, out of that conversation that happened with Moses and those elders who asked the question, don't we deserve pastors too, in that moment, were all Native leaders in the LCA. So all 8 people that came together, whom came to be called wisdom keepers, came and developed what the curriculum would look like, what the syllabi should look like. And so the program was created by Native people for Native people. We consider, and we also say if we use the word indigenous, Moses Penamaka is indigenous from India. And so Moses, we include him in that conversation since he's been such a great support, of course, throughout the whole process. So making sure that everybody at the table is indigenous was important to us. Making sure that as we develop the coursework, the courses, I should say, that the syllabus for each of them would also then reflect an indigenous pedagogy. Indigenous pedagogy right now can be a variety of things. Some of the things that we're focused on, that we have been mostly focused on, is story, is experience, and is listening / learning together. And so all of that um, has been important to us. Out of all the teachers that came to teach, the professors, the wisdom keepers that came to teach weren't just the ones that helped develop the program, but were also others, indigenous folks that were invited to come and teach. So for instance, Reverend Dr. Robert Smith, who's the new dean at the Lutheran School of Theology, Chicago, was not a developer, but came to teach a couple of times. We also sometimes paired the indigenous person with a scholar from a seminary, but not just PLTS, but other seminaries and other academic communities to come and teach. And many of them were Native. 80% of our teachers through the whole program were indigenous. Those that were not were taken through a pretty good, I think, because I did it, orientation of what indigenous pedagogy could be and should be. And then while I usually taught alongside them, I certainly was in the room to kind of guide where the pedagogy might have gone off track. That only happened 2 times, twice small. Sometimes you just have to go off track, because how do you teach Lutheran or church history from an indigenous pedagogy? Because that's a pretty colonized message. And so lots of listening, but it's pretty straightforward lecture in many cases. But that's an exception. So we were very intentional about all things indigenous. PLTS, Dr. Ray Pickett, who was the rector there before Colleen Wyndham Hughes, was very supportive of making sure that we had what we needed in regard to supporting the wisdom keepers and the teaching, and that the students had what they needed. The program was completely funded by money that I raised and money that was raised by PLTS. And so the students had no costs. They just had to show up and be a part of those 3 sessions a year, which is a lot. Some of us think, oh, that's just 3 a year, because the work that we do, we can finagle our schedules to maybe be somewhere for 3 weeks out of the year, because we're professionals in a particular way. But when you have lay leaders who are leading a congregation or a community, who are traditional practitioners in some regards, so the ceremonies are also to be considered outside of even the church setting. They have their own families. They have their own jobs that they have to ask time off for. That's a huge cost. So while I say it's free, it doesn't cost them anything, the cost still is pretty great, where they have to take weeks off or take their vacation to do this study with the group. The group, because we met together 3 times out of the year, 8 times altogether, the group, of course, had some cohesion, had some really great vibe to it, and so we're really thankful for that. Excuse me.
I apologize, but Sarah has to break out here in 5 minutes, and she's just anything you want to give us quickly on an update on the discernment process for holy orders in the church in the Episcopal Church, Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, we're still in the midst of our process of redesign. We've engaged with about 25 people more, maybe, from around the diocese, and we're doing a lot of listening and a lot of working groups. And I actually need to go to one of those working groups, which is why I have to leave a little bit early. So I do apologize. I promise it's relevant. What I'm hearing here during the time that I've been able to be with you is really, really encouraging and heartening. I'm hearing a lot of learning together. Hearing a lot of learning in context, both in terms of locale, but also in terms of culture and relationship. And these are values that we are trying to bring forward into our labyrinthine canonical process as we seek to redesign it and as we seek to look at what discernment might look like. There's tons of learnings from what Sandy talked about with the history of total ministry and what I'm hearing Brad and Mary and Vance talk about with Indigenous pathways and different types of pedagogy and ways of learning. So I'm super grateful. I don't have like a slideshow yet because I think I need another 6 months before I've got something that can gel into a PowerPoint deck. But that's kind of where we are, and I'm here for another 3 minutes. And if anybody has any questions, I'm super happy to chat with any of you after this call as well. And if you're local, I'd love to get coffee.
I really look forward to that unfolding conversation, Sarah. I had my quarterly meeting with the bishops last Thursday, and now as I start to take ideas from everyone and put together some key gleanings, Bishop Craig has particularly said we want to bring that back to the regional discernment group, which is you all, for your review. But I want to switch back then. Anything else for Sarah?
Oh, Sarah, just that I'll be in touch with you about getting together to talk as I did before. I'll follow up.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brad.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Vance. My apologies.
No, not a problem. And I'll just say two more things. One is that we will be the goal of this program was always to become ecumenical. So while this first cohort was ELCA only, as we tried to figure out and learn what we needed to do this well, that felt safer than trying to open it up. And so now the next cohort, which won't start in the fall, I think we're going to take a year just to assess and figure out what we need to do next and raise some funds, quite honestly. We'll be certainly reaching out to invite people who are from obviously the different denominations to be with us. We know that not every denomination will utilize our certificate program to certify someone to be a deacon or a pastor. That's okay, because the program was actually developed to enlist lay leaders who are already doing ministry, who wanted more education and more support in their communities. And it just so happened that 6 of these folks said, hey, I'd like to be ordained in the OCA. That process is possible, utilizing team and teal processes or classes, I should say, certificates. And so what's happening now is the beginning conversations, and we're doing this a little backwards. In the LCA, we oftentimes have to start our candidacy process at the beginning of their seminary education, even with team. But in this case, because of just the way in which things worked, the bishops of the synods that have students have approved doing candidacy a little different and doing it after the fact, and also looking at how best to do it in a way that's indigenous and appropriate and helpful, which hasn't always been the case for many indigenous folks or any folks in our church over the years. It's not been a nice process all the time for folks, and so we're going to do our best to form something that makes sense and is also satisfies the rigor that the church needs for it to satisfy. So we're looking forward to that. But just know that when we get started for the next round, we'll be asking folks to submit names for folks who might be interested in a certificate program like Teal. And the goal will still be to fund it all.
Excellent. Very good.
How would you define rigor there, Mr. Vance?
Well, it
And
wouldn't be how we have.
What is it based
When I said
on?
rigor, I was talking about the candidacy process.
Yeah.
So,
And what is the rigor based on?
I've not been through candidacy, so maybe
Well,
Rebel.
I'm not asking you
others.
personally, but I'm just
Yeah.
asking. That's an interesting word. Rigor from which culture
Yeah,
and
I
what under
appreciate
what
that.
circumstances?
Mhm.
And we need to look at that, I think, very carefully.
Agreed. And that's why this is so exciting because it'll be a pilot program that
Yes.
has to also meet some expectations or rigor,
Hmm.
but will be different than what other folks are experiencing outside the Indigenous experience. And so that's exciting to see what this pilot program will look like.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
thank
would,
you.
anything else there, Vance?
Nope, thank you for letting me
Yeah,
share.
I'm I'm particular no, I'm particularly taken by a couple of things there. The 80% of the teachers that are Indigenous and the 20 who you walk with through a kind of a sense of what it means to be teaching in an Indigenous space. Um, we are almost certainly looking at in White Earth as this being an intercultural setting. Um, in Rebel's presentation, one of the things she may have mentioned is that we have 70 some synodically authorized ministers in our synod. I think it was 115, 120 rostered leaders, and so those are shifting. And um, I think part of building cultural competency is decentering whiteness into indigenous spaces, and how to do that well. Um, I'm working right now on an essay on doing missiology on stolen land and how as dominant culture folks we want to stay in our lane, and how does theological education also it is already a decentering, historically has been a colonizing decentering experience for indigenous folks,
Hmm.
and how do I put this? How do we make that also a decentering experience for folks from a dominant culture? Um, so that's something I'm taken with by what you're sharing there, Vance and Brad and Mary. Indigenizing the academy means the whole academy, I think, and not just for Native leaders. Um, and that's one of the questions and challenges I'm working with. We've skipped over one of the key questions here is, and I want to go back to Dana and Sandy. Um, what are some of the key elements in your approach, and how could they inform a White Earth context? And what is non-negotiable that has helped your program be successful and translates well?
I would say an approach, sort of like we did at St. James, would work for White Earth too, where you would create something together, like if you were going to do a liturgy or whatever, and everybody would have a voice in how it came together and participate in it, and then critique yourself after it was over, sort of like you do in seminary, where you try it out and see if it fits, and then go on. And that could be done in many different areas. For one thing, we want to learn at St. Luke's more about the Ojibwe singers. And so we're hoping to invite them to teach us what the songs mean and words. And so I'm thinking all of those different areas of music and art and culture could be shared and learned from each other in a group setting so that it's community. You build community when you're having a meal together and talking about all these things. So that's, I guess, my take on how learning situations would work in White Earth context, just like in any other context.
That's great, Dana. Immediately, I'm thinking of the Red Lake Mass
Yes.
that was developed on Red Lake by Mark McDonald and others. And I use that almost exclusively when I'm leading worship services on White Earth. And so folks are already saying, when can we develop a White Earth Mass?
Hmm.
And to try it out, see, and work on developing a liturgy that's contextual, that's indigenous, and see how it fits. And yeah.
Well, and I think storytelling too is, and creations, just going through all the different creation stories, just like the Bible creation stories, but in all different cultures, how did we come to be? And just, I think there's lots of exciting ways that non-native people could learn and enjoy, you know, it, it as a discernment process for their ministry too.
Yeah, that's one of the key elements I see at White Earth is that we teach contextual theology. And even when someone is decentered by their experiences on White Earth, they also are given toolbox to go back to their own community and say, what does context mean here? And how do we create contextual theology for Brainerd, for suburban Twin Cities, wherever? Yeah.
In regard to what Dana had to say, the bishop had his Northwest tour last August, and we met in Detroit Lakes and had a absolutely wonderful time together. And the Red Lake Pipe Carrier came and drummed us into the service, the ecumenical Eucharistic service together. And when we've had our Northwest, Northeast missionary meetings in Brainerd, um, we used some of the indigenous services with the north, east, south, and west directions and all the internet information that goes through that. So if we can do those things a couple times, why can't we do it more often? And why can't we teach in our liturgy groups within our churches, you know, how to gradually work towards some of these types of things? Um, but it has to come from within the group. It can't be forced upon anybody to do these kinds of things. But it takes a lot of sensitivity, I think, along the way. Um, so total ministry, I think, up in our place, I know Sandy helped us so much and Steve Shadeberger, and it took us a long time. But we were supposed to follow the manual, but we decided that maybe we should figure out what's going on in our community and listen to what people are saying, and then modify what we're doing in our church to help carry the good roadway in the community in that manner. And I certainly believe that, and Mark, you're there, and you know that, and I've been there a number of times, but we've got to have the people in White Earth decide these things and lead the way. You know, when I was a kid, we used to play together all the time on the weekends, and then all of a sudden 4 o'clock came along, and all of a sudden we disbanded. And you know why? The Catholics went to the Catholic Church, and the rest of us went somewhere else. And it was like our community fell apart. You know, and that was really crazy to think about that. Because the rest of the time we were in school together, you know, we did things together in the community. So listening to the community, our bishop told us, you're done with the pastor. You got to get it together. You're going to have some other way to take care of yourselves. You're not going to have the money to do it. So get it together and talk amongst yourselves. And that's when Sandy and Steve came. And people decided that, yep, we got to do this from within by ourselves and listen to what people want to do. And that was really important as part of being a total ministry, developing us. And we went through the Litchfield. We went through all these. We've been through them 3 times up in our church. And the biggest part of the thing was building the team and building the trust over time. And if you don't do that, then you get into what we hear about is all the bickering and the human relations issues and things like that. And it takes a long time to keep that together. But you got to have people buying into that and being part of it and build that trust. And so to me, what I hear Mary saying today, she summarized it in about a sentence. And I hear the same from Brad, and I heard the same from Vince, is that we got to keep it simple and we got to keep it in the ideas of people's what's joyful to them and what they want to do and how they want to share things together. And all these, there's lots of other things that get in the way of that. And so I hope that I was really impressed, Mary and Brad and Vince, by what you've taught us today. And I think it's really important.
Sandy.
I wanted to add that the program Total Ministry that I worked with was paralleled by the Kaosed school. So we did not specifically work with the White Earth congregations. And I feel I don't know if Howie can address some of any of what went with Kaosed, because I said that in the email. I know so very little about what they did, but I think whatever learnings that came from that experience could be valuable. But I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some overlap. I think, did we just lose Robert? I was hoping to ask Bob to.
I think the first total ministry and gifts discovery process started under the auspices of the Minnesota Committee on Indian Work. So it actually predated. I think when the Holy Trinity, we called it, Mark McDonald, John Robertson, who's Dakota, and Doyle Turner, Ojibwe, two of whom were NATA grads, that program I directed. They and I think it's really wrong-headed, and Dana and I are facing this right now, where the diocese is saying, stay in your lane. White Earth doesn't necessarily need to be a part of the Northwest Mission area efforts and total ministry. So what Sandy and Dana described and Lee went through are not very different than from what the Kaosed program did, other than it was firmly based in lay people being trained for lay ministries and ordained ministries, and it was focused on gospel-based discipleship. So it was very grassroots. So, but I think its children took it the next level. The total ministry program took it the next level. But we were really in the Kaosed program. We were really borrowing from the Diocese of Alaska and the Diocese of Nevada, who really were the first ones to do that work.
We had a bishop from Yukon and a bishop from Inuit over as a rector in St. John's Anglican in Fort Francis,
Cool.
across the road from us.
Yeah.
And we got together one time because he wanted to bring his church with us and our total ministry team. And we had a nice breakfast. We spent 3 hours together talking about whether they would like to do that. And we used to go up into Canada and talk about our total ministry stuff with people in Atikokan and Sioux Narrows and all kinds of places. And the Bishop Yukon said, I was the bishop up in Inuit and I listened a lot. I didn't really say too much. That's where we need to be.
I see Bob is back on here. And I just want to invite you, Robert, if you have anything you want to share as you're collecting your thoughts. I just want to identify a couple of key things that Sandy had mentioned in her reflection on our work in total ministry. Sometimes there's a struggle with hierarchy, and you noted that in your verbal comments as well earlier. And also in Mark McDonald's piece that Robert shared, that congregational leaders were enabled to be recognized by traditional leadership development schemes, but were nevertheless making a difference in their communities. Analogies were made with indigenous practice, and for example, the work of pipe carriers. It was understood that these leaders, more often than not, would not be considered appropriate for leadership in colonial churches. I think that's all often that barrier of hierarchy or a model of leadership that's unique or novel. Anyway, Bob, I apologize. I'm clomping on you too much here.
Oh, that's okay. My laptop shut down for some strange reason, so it's um, yeah. Well, hey, I apologize for everyone for my coming in late. I had did an invocation downtown Loring Park. They were working on it's the Berger fountain that's down there. It's been off for a while. They just raised a bunch of money and they're going to start working on it. Um, Yeah, so I shared yesterday, last night, late. I got the summary, historical summary of all the training that was been done here in Minnesota for probably the last, well, since 80s maybe or 90s. So it's been a long run, and different things are going on. You know, with, um, Mark McDonald. That was his summary, which is actually pretty good. He said it's a brief summary, and at some point he'd probably share more about it, more in depth, and that'll be interesting. As a student of history, I'm always really interested in things that occurred, uh, not only with American history but also the Episcopal Church and whatnot. Um, I've been my experience with uh, theological education and training, lay leadership training, things like that, extends way back. Uh, most, as somebody who just kind of observed and been around it for a long time. As some of you know, my dad was a priest, Episcopal Church, ordained back in 1978. Uh, and he was in a program out in South Dakota called the Dakota Leadership Program, which was led by uh, the late Right Reverend George Harris, who was a priest at the time in South Dakota, in Moorebridge, South Dakota. Then it was later taken over by uh, the, Bishop Steve Charleston. Uh, at that point, he was not yet ordained. He was doing a lot of teaching. So that would have been in the late 70s. Um, and then he had moved over here to Minnesota, that started his work here, and connected to the seminary in uh, Luther Seminary. And so, so the training has just been ongoing. It's different cohorts have emerged from each of these schools. And I think it's interesting from at least my perspective, historical perspective, when I look at each of these models that have been developed through the years, that one of the things that happens is that we ordained and we get these cohorts, and that extends clear until uh, the last one, the Cowsed School Ministry, which uh, we ordain these groups of people, then we sit back and say, okay, we're good for now. And then uh, after a few years, things happen in people's lives. They end up retiring, they move on, or they um, make their journey on to the next life. Um, Here in Minnesota, in the 90s, there was a good cohort of people that attended, which was then Seabury Western Seminary, like John Robertson, Doyle Turner, Melanie Spears, and there's others I know. I just can't remember the names. I think um, Brad may remember some of those folks. So there was a large number from that cohort, and then by the time I attended seminary at the latter part of the 90s, at that point, I'm like the only, as far as I know, the only native person who was attending a theological Episcopal seminary. So that would have been from 97 to 2000. Um, and so looking at the historical, I just think about, well, what's next? It's on one hand, we tend to reinvent the wheel. On the other hand, we sort of shine up the wheel, but like it's uh, that's kind of makes me wonder, well, what's next? So, I've connected some with Vancouver School of Theology and their Indigenous training program there for the last at least over 15 years now. Able to teach a lot of individuals, like I was able to teach a class in preaching in an Indigenous context, urban Native ministry, those kind of interesting subjects. And through it all, a lot of individuals have come out of that, whether that's through the UCC Church, the Anglican Church, or the Episcopal Church. Some of those folks are ordained. Some of those folks are just doing various work in their churches. So it's been an interesting time period for me as my own experience with theological education. Now, this invocation I gave, I think maybe it speaks to what I've been listening to in the words shared here. The Berger Foundation is, or the Berger Fountain, uh, essentially is like a dandelion that's has its uh, ready to let loose its seeds, and so it's kind of the common dandelion. And then, it's considered an invasive species that is a nuisance to green lawns enclosed by the white picketed fences and despised by gardeners. This species that we are familiar with was brought over by Europe by early European settlers in the 1600s and was used as a survival food and has medicinal qualities. It was the first green edible plant that emerges from the soil after a brutal winter. It also has the vitamin C, which helped prevent scurvy among the early settlers. Uh, for them, the dandelion symbolizes survival. There is also an indigenous species that's commonly known as the horned and the harp dandelions and are found in the alpine environments and subarctic zones. They too were used by native peoples for nutrition and medicine. And one of the things I said about this is that I gave this was part of my uh, intro into land acknowledgement. They said that we are on the ancestral lands of my relatives, the Dakota Oyate, and I focused on this fact that this fountain can be a symbol of peace that can exist between us, Indigenous peoples, First Nations people, Native folks, and uh, folks of European descent. Um, since 1776, the United States has been at war for uh, 230 to 235 years as of 2026. That is both declared and undeclared wars. The Indian Wars have lasted from 1789 to 1891. That's 102 years approximately. So, on one hand, we look at this country and the history of it, and we're a pretty violent and war-mongering nation. Uh, We've only maybe experienced peace for 15 to 20 of those years as a nation. So maybe as we go forward with this endeavor, with this ministry, with this work, that we could continue to promote this peace that we find under the banner of the church, Christ and Jesus, uh, and what does that look like going forward? Um, so that's my words for the moment here, and I got plenty to say all the time, so I'll just keep it short. Thanks.
I think Bob, you were we were visiting last night or yesterday that the mayor of Minneapolis was at the dedication too. Is that right?
He didn't make it.
Uh,
He's yeah, those guys, they have things going on. They're busy all the time, I guess, and like a lot of us. But they had the local council guy there and stuff, so it was good. Uh, Nice
we
day to
are
be out there.
okay, we're running up on 5 o'clock. And thank you I just want to thank you all for this amazing time together. Like I had shared earlier, I'm going to be working on some key gleanings from your sharing and your presentations and many of the documents you've already shared with me. Um, Vance, again, I'm very curious about that whole how do you train somebody who's non-native to be teaching in indigenous spaces? That's remarkably interesting. I see Howie raising his hands here.
Just a couple of minutes because what I've heard is so exciting. Um, in 1976, there were two indigenous people in all mainline U.S. and Canadian seminaries. So this group of native spiritual leaders and clergy and bishops got together and formed the Native American Theological Association. And the things that we did starting in 1977, I just see so many the things that I learned directing that program of what didn't work. Y'all have deep sixed,
Mm.
and the things that do work uh, have been maintained. One of the ways we in sort of help to decolonize the seminary programs was one, it was ecumenical and intertribal, exactly like Vance talked about how central and Mary, everybody that's doing it knows that, and Brad, everybody knows that's what you have to do. NATA started with a Lilly grant, uh, 4 denominations, uh, 4 seminaries, and they have all, there was a board that was not exclusively, but predominantly native spiritual leaders, mostly clergy. And one of the ways we decolonized it is every summer we had a Black Hills summer term, which rotated from the UCC camp to the Presbyterian camp to the Episcopal camp. And we brought in native spiritual leaders. We had something clicks when you have Episcopal bishops, synod presidents in the Lutheran Church, conference ministers in the UCC and the Sweat Lodge, and experiencing the weepy ceremonies and the ceremonies of healing and naming ceremonies. And then in the winter, we met at a place called Cook Christian Training School that for decades was the primary place where indigenous people were getting trained outside of the seminary process. And we would bring the seminary professors there. And one of the key things was that there were, as a community of indigenous people, so the cohorts like y'all are talking about, so central. I remember the second year of NATA, there were 12 seminarians who were indigenous at United Theological Seminary in the Twin Cities. And at Dubuque Seminary, Presbyterian Seminary, there were 5. What happens then is all the students the courses started to be offered. I was teaching, John Robertson was teaching, other scholars were teaching, George Tinker, these people who were making the theology in an indigenous setting, those people were involved. And I'll say is that one of the keys are those cohorts, those communities. So even then it was hard. I think of when some of the later Native students like Doyle Turner and John Robertson was there. There was a lot of racism that had to be confronted. Boom, really hard stuff. And people like John and Doyle had enough courage to do that. So everything I've heard says you all are heading in the right direction. And the things that didn't work before, like insufficient mentoring, like pulling those who, right from the beginning, pulling those who are thinking or feel called or are put forward by a community to be ordained, taking them away from the context, that's where you ran into trouble. And the feeder was a large program of theological education. By extension, the Cook School and the Presbyterian Church really had developed, but the Episcopalians and other groups were using them. So these people were the discernment process took place in the context of the ministry. And I love the idea, what Wartburg's doing about that that the competency-based work can be done while someone is ministering in the community. And as Vance talked about, some of the folks, it's a real sacrifice to, if you're a working person, which almost all the Native people were, there needed to be resources so that they could travel for those cohort gatherings. And all of it seems to be in place. I think the only confusion I feel is how do you put it all together? And what does that look like on White Earth? I wrote something to Mark about 8 questions I had, and pretty much they were all answered today. There are people doing this work that have thought it through, struggled with it, field tested it. So this is the most encouraged I've been since NADA stopped. And I think Brad made the statement, after NADA, nothing happened for a long time. But there were 76 MDivs or equivalent of Indigenous people from that one program because it was ecumenical. There were clusters of Indigenous people, and the whole thing started in the context of Indigenous congregations. So wow, you guys rock. I hope I live to see how it all plays out.
Well, I will see you tonight in Detroit Lakes.
Okay.
I'm going to head over there here fairly soon. But if I can be so bold as to close us in prayer, one just other key thing, Brad, you and I met over the phone, about a year ago at this time, maybe even a little before that. And you indicated, as you did today, we're not small enough to do this all on our own, or we're not big enough to do this all on our own. We need each other.
Cannot.
And that is so vitally important. I think we're stronger because of meetings like we've had today.
So what are
From
the steps?
from the Disciples Prayer Book.
What are the next steps?
I'm going to be working on compiling some of the key gleanings. We didn't all necessarily get to share our detailed questions about the next steps or the well, I've lost my my agenda. What are the key takeaways and what can be shared in White Earth? Please, if you could email me any other further thoughts on that. But my 90-day calendar is really focused on number 25%. I'm working on that project in Pine Point, and now it's really to start taking a lot of what we've been sharing today. You've been generous with your documents, and to begin building something to bring back to you as some draft ideas for a White Earth School for Theology.
And how does what we talk about today get to the White Earth community?
It primarily gets there and by the one person that's in the Zoom room with me is Howie Anderson, that we're going to be bringing this to our White Earth board that's made up of both Native and non-Native leaders.
So it's getting there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I really like the lenses of models of contextual theology. What's scripture, what's tradition, what's culture, and the fourth one is where is our longing for social change? And to be in an academic setting where we're in White Earth and looking at some of the greatest disparities of education and economic disparities, that piece I think also needs to be included here. Where is this in this context? Where are we longing for social change? Um, and that's one of the little spices that I'd like to add to the mix.
You know, Sandy
Um,
Sandy stood in 2012 at Martin in front of the convention along with people from White Earth and asked for the denunciation of the doctrine of discovery.
yep.
That's
Mhm.
that's 14 years ago.
Yep.
The question is,
Lee,
are we making any headway?
I don't think we will if all we do is we say we're sorry. I value that denunciation to say that the doctrine of discovery is essentially opposed to the gospel of Jesus Christ. But the question that we have to start asking ourselves now is now that we've said we're sorry, particularly dominant culture folks, what is the next step? And how
Yeah.
do we live into community together? And how do we address issues of social change? I'm going to close with a prayer from the disciples' prayer book. The Lord be with you.
And also
And
with you.
also with you.
This evening prayer I offer with you. Lord Jesus, stay with us, for evening is at hand and the day is past. Be our companion in the way. Kindle our hearts and awaken hope, that we may know you as you are revealed in Scripture and the breaking of bread. Grant this for the sake of your love. Amen.
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 Thank you all. God bless you.
You
You.
guys are amazing.
Thank you.